Hello, welcome to the Shelly Show. I'm Shailendra and you're watching this simulcast live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I hope you and your family is safe. We've done many shows on artificial intelligence. AI, as it is called, is a constellation of technologies from machine learning to natural language processing that allows machines to sense, comprehend, act, and learn. Artificial intelligence will transform the relationship between people and technology, changing our creativity and skills. The future of AI promises a new era of disruption and productivity where human ingenuity is enhanced by speed and precision. AI startups is an area that has been growing for the past several years. This particular technology, this particular area of technology, of application, has, if you look at annually, the global investment in AI startups by CB Insights they've reported that AI startups raised a record $26.6 billion in 2019, which is spanning over 2,200 deals worldwide, which increased from $16.6 billion in 2017. So it is substantially increasing by the day. There are two components to this. One is artificial intelligence, and the second is AI startups. To discuss both the components, I thought of creating a series where we will discuss both artificial intelligence and speak to startup leaders, CEOs, co-founders. Hence, I'm starting this series, Artificial Intelligence Startup Insight Series. Welcome to the first episode of the series. Now, we needed an expert who could guide us through the series and advise the participants. Who better than someone who strategized IBM's Watson in its initial days? So I reached out to Dr. Marc Teerlink, and he kindly agreed to be part of the show. Dr. Marc Teerlink is SAP's Global Vice President for Intelligent Enterprise Solutions and Artificial Intelligence. Marc is a serial corporate entrepreneur responsible for vision and products that enable digital transformation of businesses around the world through innovation, data monetization, artificial intelligence, and machine learning technologies. Prior to SAP, Marc was IBM Watson's chief business strategist during IBM formative years of AI. Marc is active in startup community, so even more so, he's important to this call, as an angel investor, mentor, and board member, and has been an active participant of the World Government Summit's Global Governance of AI Roundtable since its conception in 2018. So without any further ado, let me bring Marc to the show. Hi, Marc.
Good morning, Shelley. Good morning, everybody out the world. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're hanging out at the moment.
Welcome to the AI Startup Insight series. I'm just trying to get hang of the name as well because it's too long. And to be honest, this name was mandated by many people over Twitter and Reddit this time around. There were around about 200 votes, and this name came one of the names that we could use. So here we go. So tell us about yourself. I have given a brief introduction. Let our audience know where you come from, what is your thought process, and who you are.
Thank you, Shelley. So first is I'm half Dutch, lived in 9 countries, and lived and worked in 3 continents. And data and using data and monetizing data has been an incredible passion of mine in the last 25 years. Now, this has always been mostly from a business point, but if you can't break the magic code, if you can't really make the secret sauce in business with the data is useless, but the business is also going to go in all kind of directions. And the best example I always take is about causality and correlation. When we take pure correlation, we can absolutely say, for instance, that there is a strong connection between global warming and the people that stop smoking. Because let's face it, the more people stop smoking, the more global warming went up. but there's no causality. And this is the really essential part. The moment we start using algorithm and we use data to train them, this is what AI does, right? Everything is about the business mindset. It's not technology, but it's knowing what you're doing. And that's actually the one liner that has been guiding me most of my life, Shelley.
So, to be honest, I actually give the same example. I gave the same example in last of my data science episodes, and you are actually reinforcing the same comment. Truly speaking, the global warming and cigarette smoking is a great example of what people can think about causation and correlation, and I think you've nailed it. So you've been on many boards, many AI startup boards, AI-based startups boards as well. So what do you see in the market? How is it going? What kind of technologies do you see these guys using? Is it machine learning mostly focused, or is it IoT focused? What do you see? What kind of startups are doing these days?
So
I think you're frozen, Mark.
I hate it when it happens. Can you hear my voice or not?
I can hear you, but I can't see you. We can't see you moving, but you can keep talking.
Excellent. We just keep moving and figure out how we can fix this. So we need to realize that AI is not one thing, as you said yourself, right? AI is a set of technologies that we orchestrate. So if we take a set of technologies like a little bit of machine learning, a little bit of data science, a little bit of robotic process automation, a little bit of classic BI, we use that to take one task. It's one task, mostly of a knowledge worker, professional, or an expert. And when we do that one task, we need to infuse it with knowledge as well. This is mostly called the training. So let me give you a really good example. If you want to build a chatbot, you're not just going to need a series of technology with a UI. You're not just going to need a parser, as that's called it. You need to train it with 1,000 or 1,000,000 versions of that same question. So if you're a hotel concierge chatbot, and the question is, how do I get on the internet? What is the Wi-Fi password? How do I get my iPhone to send emails? These are all versions of the same question, and you parse it to one thing. So you orchestrate this with the knowledge of a concierge. In what million ways do you get the questions? What leads to that one answer? And what is the answer we will give this person, this customer, this consumer in this specific situation? But that's different when you search something, right? We're going to have some phenomenal people coming up later. And when we talk about things like amplification, we need what they call inference. A is B, B is C, C is D. So an iPhone, if somebody talks about, oh, my 11 Pro, that actually means the same as an iPhone 11. That means the same as my my latest iOS device, etc. So A is B, B is C, C is D. That's a different kind of machine learning. Now, some people might say potato, Shelley, whatever. The point is, when you create an app, an AI-centric app, it's almost like enterprise architecture thinking. You need to think about what are the components that you will use, what are the components that you will use at this moment to actually deal with the problem you're trying to solve. And most startups start phenomenal with creating a wonderful prototype, show to investors, they neck the problem, but they haven't layered it. They haven't put it in lasagna layers, to say it like that. So if you're going to use inference, which platform are you going to do it? IBM Watson, Salesforce Einstein, SAP Machine Learning, Microsoft Cognitive, Google TensorFlow, OpenAI, right? I mean, there's a lot of sources. But then you start building your own code around it, little data science here, little orchestration there, little sexy UI interaction here. And if you hardwire it and hard-coded it, you come so far with what you think is your minimum viable product. But the reality is, after 9 months and 11 successful things, you have your first customer, comes your second customer, and you need to modify it, or one of your third-party technology platform has depreciated the service. You need to go back in time. And suddenly your burn rate is 4 times what it was to make the original prototype, because you thought your prototype was your minimum viable product. So the point is to understand AI is actually not so much to understand technology, but it's a little bit what made Apple successful with the iPod and the iPhone. The iPod was successful because it had an ecosystem to get music. The iPhone would become even more successful because it had a wireless app store to get music and apps, etc. So for you to think about how will I deal with my ecosystem around me and the technology components, right? And how will I orchestrate the components to become an AI-centric solution that might have 10, 15% machine learning only on its essential part. That is a make or break moment technology-wise for startups.
Yep. Okay, so you mentioned amplification. Can you put a more stress and explain it more in details? When you talk amplification, are we talking about only getting data from the social media internet, or are we talking about data coming in from all the ends? And what kind of business outcomes have you seen when amplification works?
So the first is a really good question. So the reality is, of course, that 70% of today's companies are using already 70% of their data from the outside. Yep. So if you have outside data, right, you try to mostly give it a context with something internal. So there's two kinds of amplification. We purely take what they call the wisdom of the crowds. So let's take an example with financial information, right? Pre-COVID, we could already see a lot of things happening by listening to the transcripts of financial reports by CFO, because you can't lie. You can not emphasize, you can not highlight, you can accidentally omit, but you can't lie in those transcripts for your shareholders. And then you see all kind of reporting about performance in things like a supply chain, etc. So actually, if we really listened, and wisdom as the crowd is not that everybody is smart, but if we really take the collective individual signals and we amplify the movement there, we could see a trend already in January, like supply chain is going down, manufacturing are not done, ships are not loaded, etc. We could already taking their data to amplify what's the impact going to be for Western Europe, East Coast America, West Coast America, what moment, Singapore, India, etc., what moment in time. So amplification has multiple things. So you always need to look at purpose, right? One is taking outside data, what is happening, like what trends, etc. But the second is, how do you connect it back to your internal data, the data behind your firewall, and say, what does that mean for me? What is the impact? If you and I as consumers here, like, production in China in January for medical supplies are now by 77%. We're like, yeah. So the moment I tell you that means if you don't have a mask now, you might not get a face mask in a month. And then you get the madness of the mobs, right? And everyone said, mask, and they go out and run that, right? So there's also a nuance part, like, what does it mean not for you today, but what does it mean for you and the people around you in the coming days, weeks, months? So as Mark Twain said, prediction is always hard, especially when it's about the future. And that's a little bit where one of the issues basically is. Like, this is where that statement of correlation, which I liberally stole and borrowed from you, by the way, Shelley. That's why that example of the correlation and causality comes in. The moment you have that external data, you bring it back to your internal data, and you take those emotions or the sentiments, all these things you're basically take in. That's the moment you say, how am I going to connect it in some business causality part with my internal data?
Okay. We've got more than 50 people watching us. So guys, if you've got a question for Mark and other guests, which are coming very soon, then please put those questions in the comment section and I'll take them up. Definitely, I'll take them up. We've got Mark for the first time on the show, and I hope he will be here in future as well. So you've got a question for Mark, just put in there. And for you to view this episode and any other sessions that I run on Emerging Technologies Live, I would request you to follow me so that you can be alerted when the live session is on. This gives you an opportunity to directly ask questions from our guests. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, follow me. If you're watching on Twitter, follow me. If you're watching on YouTube, please press the bell icon and and the subscribe button so you can get alerted. So thank you very much, all of you watching. So there are more than 50 people watching at the moment. Okay, we talked about amplification, and we're talking about startups. So I don't think it will make any sense if we don't get anyone who are really in the game of amplification. So one such product that focuses on amplification is nwo.ai. You can go to the website and have a look. nwo.ai is an intelligence amplification platform that harnesses machine learning techniques and human metadata to identify global cultural shifts early and throughout the life cycle of trends across various sectors, ranging from consumer products to global war and conflicts. So it is quite interesting. The NWO interface is designed like a search engine for trends and uncovers predictive, actionable intelligence on virtually any topic or domain through 20 plus million signals. This continues to grow as the cutting edge technology NLP examines the contextual nature of words in the data feeds to proactively add to the vocabulary. A quantified metrics for the evolution of a trend, all in less than a minute. Now, this is very, very interesting. So today I have with me the co-founders of nwo.ai, Pulkit Jaiswal and Imogen. So without wasting any time, let me bring them to the AI Startup Insight series. Pulkit and Imogen.
Hey guys.
We've got Marc back and he's not frozen anymore. So Pulkit and Imogen, welcome to AI Startup Insight series.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Excited to share what we've got going on.
So guys, one by one, first Pulkit, no Pulkit, first Imogen, ladies first. Tell us about yourself and introduce you to the world of social media. Well, I think many people know you already, but for my audience.
So hi, I'm Imogen. Before I joined Control and nwo.ai, I was actually working for SAP as a data scientist, software engineer. I started working for SAP when I was 17 years old after starting an indoor navigation company and winning a set of national and international technology awards. I've worked all over APJ for SAP, and I've had a lot of fun, leading machine learning projects for a range of different industries.
Brilliant stuff. Pulkit, your turn.
Sure. So I would say in my previous life, I say previous life because it's been like 5 years, which in the startup world is probably like 20 years. In my previous life, I was working on drone systems. So my last company, it's called SwarmX. We were basically building fully automated drone systems. And we were basically building a box where a drone can land, recharge, and go out again. And I learned a lot from the experience. As you know, hardware is hard. And basically, it trained me to become the entrepreneur I am today. And then I took a break from starting up, became an independent geopolitical consultant, worked with quite a few hedge funds on everything ranging from predicting the Russian-Ukrainian invasion that took place. And it's all the financial assets that changed or were volatile as a result of it. And that kind of like inspired me to focus on predicting some long-term mega shifts that are taking place in the world today. And that pretty much inspired me to start Control. I came up with the idea sometime around December 2018. And we were fully funded, up and running by February 2019. And it's been about I would say a year and a half of crazy awesome fun. And we're based out of New York City, and greatest city in the world.
Good stuff. I gave a bit of introduction about nwo.ai. I think it'll be a good idea for you to explain to the world what it is and how it looks like, what you can do with it. So it's your stage to explain the product itself, and I decide amongst both of you, you decide who wants to go.
Sure, I guess I'll take a crack at it, and maybe Imogen can talk a little bit more about the technological capabilities and what sort of data sets we're tapping into. So essentially what we're doing is we're wielding the internet as our data set. And so we believe that the internet on any given day represents the psychology of the world at any given point of time. So by understanding patterns in this rich data set, we believe that we can predict the future of certain trends. And a lot of the trends that you see these days are just recycled versions of trends that existed many years before. In fact, a lot of big changes that are taking place, even politically, are changes that happened 100 years ago. And
you were telling me that you guys predicted the Indo-China tussle that's going on now when it happened?
Yeah, well, not just that. The India-China war, or the India-China potential war situation almost broke out, I would say, in mid-June. We predicted it a month and a half in advance. Another example of something that we are predicting, in fact, we're going to send it out in a newsletter tomorrow, is a potential conflict that's escalating between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Nile River. There's a dam that's being constructed, and this could lead to a potential conflict. And so our signals are off the charts. Outside of political spectrum, I would say we predicted that plexiglass all over the world was going to get sold out because self-checkout counters around the world and even restaurants are now, putting barriers between people. And we knew that the chatter about plexiglass was going to escalate all the way back in March. And so, we could work with potential supply chain customers and warn them in advance. So again, I would say that we're equally adept at solving political stuff for political candidates, clients who are interested in geopolitical signals, as well as consumer products and supply chain. So we don't have a focus per se. We kind of are a startup at a point where we are down to work with pretty much everybody.
Yep. Before I get to Imogen, a couple of things. So, Mr. Prime Minister of India, if you're watching this, then you should reach out to Pulkit because he predicted the Indo-China tussle a few months ago. Anyone in Government of India, if you're watching, he predicted that a few months ago. And anyone from Egypt and Ethiopia who's watching this, he's just predicted that there is a potential tussle between the two countries as well. So you might want to reach out to Pulkit on that. Before I go to Imogen, Mark, do you want to add something to what Pulkit was saying?
Well, first is Imogen and Pulkit. It's phenomenal what you guys are doing. There aren't many companies at the moment in the world that actually have created such ability. So first, kudos there. That's the kindness before the grilling, right? And but more important is as Pulkit said, you'll see these things from an external data point of view, and you'll come with a scenario in prediction and say this and this is very likely to happen, but we never know what's happening tomorrow. So there's always a black swan that we need to include in this. The point is always for companies when they see it that most people don't have a high data literacy level from normal professional education and background. And the more we go to boardroom level, right, it is still a dependency mostly on a younger, more dynamic data science and business background entourage or support that they have. So when you are this executive, let's say you're a retailer or you are a manufacturer and you have to there's more demand for plexiglass. So what? And this is really where it goes wrong, right? The so what interpretation, and this is also for startups, right? It's this moment you're providing. It's not a raw material anymore. You mine raw material with nwo.ai and offer that, but a real revenue model. And this is less for the NWO folks, but more for the viewers and listeners. A real revenue model for a startup must think from day one on beyond that moment you sell. So let's say you say, oh, great, we have sold 50 clients a feed for data. Think about when you go to a car dealer. A good car salesman wouldn't say, after you do the test drive, so what do you think? No, it would say, so when are you going to park it? And are you going to have child seats? You haven't even signed the contract yet, and they go to the next step. So as a startup, you need to think about what is my revenue model gonna be, right?
Sure.
But also, what is my customer's revenue gonna change because of what I do? So your revenue model is partly pricing, but it's also your business proposition. Freemium, premium are typical kind of things, like I give you 5 feeds, or I'll give you freebies, or I give you a general dashboard for the world, or whatever. And the revenue model, and the point is, how much do you give to your customer? Do you say a one solution fits all? And then there's an adaptation layer, how you'll put it in and how you apply it as a client. Or are you, and this is the risk that most companies go down on, I'm going to customize the heck out of everything for my first 15 customers. That's the best recipe to burn more money than ever and never get a solid product, right? So I think what is being done is amazing, and there's no negative thing I want to have ever in that connotation. It's phenomenal what you guys are doing. As I said, I know less than a handful of companies in the world that are doing this at this moment, at this level. But the next part is how you're going to scale. How are you going to scale this in a way that your revenue model doesn't get the hit, that you don't get burned in customizing everything for clients? So think about white label apps. Somebody makes one code and then they say, do you want this app for your company? Do you want this app for your church? Do you want this app for your sports club? Well, we have an extra adaptation layer. It gives your logo in it. We put it for you in the App Store. We do this, but in the end, you get this code. And the rest is up to you. And how do you say that in such a nice way that the customer says, oh, wow, this is so great. We only have to do which is the second part, is thinking beyond the sale, is that guidance part. How do you tell upfront to your customer, this is really great, but if you don't have 2 or 3 people that aren't glorified BI report makers, these are people that are really good in spreadsheet and do not know the difference between correlation and causality, it's going to go dramatically wrong. The moment they have we don't all have to have data scientists. And by the way, Imogen, what a loss for us. That great for you that you started a company. What a loss for us that you're not with us anymore. We don't have all great data scientists, but at least some people who can work in teams. Somebody who understands the data, somebody who understands the business together, and say, what does it mean? What does it mean for us? Or what is it going to mean for my customers' customers? And those are really the difference between good and great at the startup when you come with this kind of technology offerings. I haven't even talked about the enterprise architecture behind it yet.
Well, pause here, Mark. Before you go any further, Imogen, technically, as Mark raised concern around, or a point around scaling up the system, how does it all work? How are you thinking about what's the technology behind it? Explain that to the world as well.
Okay, well, there's a few things that I could talk about. Maybe I'll dive into the technology first, and then we can talk about how we're going to bring it to market. So the internet, where we acquire the majority of our data, is an inherently noisy place, and it can be very, very difficult for us to draw the right signal out of all of the noise that is on the internet. And we have evolved a lot from, in our minimal viable products was really just a simple keyword lookup. But since then, we've evolved our technology to really push the boundaries of natural language processing. So we acquire a lot of data from social media, from forums, from blog posts, a lot of unstructured data that's very noisy and very hard to pick through. So what we're actually doing is we're using a set of leading edge natural language processing models to encode our textual data into this kind of multi-dimensional vector space where we can compute how strongly associated different ideas are at different points in time. And we display all this information in this kind of context map. We also have this section in our platform that's called this signal. And to compute the signal, it's made up of a whole bunch of different data points from all of these different data sources. It's one unified signal. And to build this, we have designed this kind of time-lagged cross-correlation algorithm that can determine which of our data points can be used as the strongest leading predictors of a trend's adoption within the marketplace. And we have designed this kind of dynamic weighting system that can amplify, the most predictive data points and then dampen and turn away the most lagging data points. And I guess we've designed the system in this way because we're really interested in analyzing how the adoption of ideas spread throughout a population and predicting that rate, I guess, of information diffusion throughout a local geo network or even throughout the entire global network. So the score that we compute for each of our trends represents the saturation or the adoption of the idea within the marketplace, not just simply a keyword lookup. So we have come a very long way in the past couple of months.
Okay. Before I ask a question, Mark, do you want to comment on what Imogen mentioned?
Can I ask Imogen a few questions?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. So, Imogen, 3 questions, and they're all related, right? The biggest issue we all know is, exactly as you say, is noise and inherent bias. I believe there's no way to not have bias in your data. It's just no way of knowing it. So the best technologies that I've seen in this space do 3 things. One, they continuously are able to monitor how did the algorithm, how did the AI, how did the machine learning come to its answer. So which sources did it do, which noise did it find, and which noise did it filter out, right? This is a transparency that more and more end receiving companies are expecting from AI-driven company. Brings us to the second part, is correction of noise, right? We all know famous examples of the American elections, the over noise, and which was deliberately done in Facebook. And just because there's a majority of opinions doesn't mean exactly that majority is where the world is going. It's just spotting outliers. So sometimes when we try to eliminate bias, we kill outliers that actually were the gold in this situation. The third is, you need to also represent this to your client. This is the depth behind it. Like for instance, we included financial reports and we included Chatter, but we excluded Facebook because, etc. So how do you guys deal with that?
Well, I suppose to get rid of the bias, we've designed a lot of mechanisms for backtesting each of our signals. What we do is we take indicators from different indices such as stock prices, and we correlate our trends to these different indices. So we also take information from historical sales data as well. So if we were to look at some kind of a metric such as the price of oximeters over time and the sale of oximeters, we would correlate our trend data from oximeters to historical sales data of the oximeters, and then update our information so that it is in correlation to some very solid trends out there.
Okay. I think, Pulkit, you want to share the screen, but before we do that, guys, if you're watching this show, and I think there are more than 60 people now, please mention your questions in the comment section and we will take those questions. And also, if you're watching it on LinkedIn, please press the follow button. If you're watching on YouTube, press the subscribe button and the bell icon so you can be alerted in the future. Pulkit wants to share his screen, and I'm doing that now. Pulkit, what do you want to add on there?
Yeah, I just feel like if I just share the screen and maybe show you like one tiny demo, it'll answer a ton of questions that Mark asked us as well. Yep, and okay. Again, because Imogen was talking about our data processing capabilities, we have built one of the largest, I would say, at par with some of the unicorns, data acquisition and parsing system. So we have about 300 million news records that we look at, and then we have about 1 billion individual consumer voices. And this basically includes conversations on all forms of social media, online media, forums, everywhere else. We have about 65 different languages that we are covering in our system, and we are curating data every 15 minutes. And we also have access to about 10 million different stakeholders. That includes, companies, IPO. Essentially, when we search for a trend, we can surface companies that are related to the trend. So those are great for like M&A opportunities. Or if you're a retail investor, you can sort of identify which stocks to invest in. And I think there was a question on the chat about, impact on market stocks, I think. Yeah, so this pretty much answers that. So with that, I'll dive into, a very quick demo. And so again, this is what the system looks like. It works like a search engine. You can ask it questions, or you can ask it simple things or complex questions, and we give you answers in less than a minute. You can ask it about 20 million different things. in real time, pretty much. So what I'll do is, okay, going back to the example that I brought up earlier, which is plexiglass, right? So I just entered plexiglass. What I arrived at is a near instant market research report on plexiglass. And so what you're seeing on this side is basically a snapshot of the trend, the past, present, future, the sentiment, and the novelty. This gives you the executive summary. So it's supposed to read like a beautiful report that gives you like an instant idea of like what's going on with the trend. So as you can see, the trend is growing exponentially, and it has an impressive track record. This gives you the full history for the last 3 years, how the trend is evolving. So what we're doing is we're quantifying trends. So you can, this doesn't have to be plexiglass. It could be as something as weird as people wanting to move out of New York during the pandemic. You can ask it about that, and we will quantify the trend for you instantly. Then we also give you the sentiment. The green stuff is obviously positive, the red stuff is negative. And as you can see, this trend was non-existent. And then out of nowhere, boom. Sometime I would say in early March, it escalated. And our system generated an alert in early March saying that this trend is going out of control and it's going through the roof. And so this is something that's worth leveraging. So in near real time, our system can generate about 20 million alerts on 20 million different trends. And so as you can see, it's grown almost 3,000% in the last 6 months. And another example of a trend that I was just searching, because we brought up the India-China example, I searched for China. And as you can see, the China trend has gone up and down quite a bit. These stars here, they represent like inflection points. So when is a trend becoming exponential? So this is where our clients get notified that, okay, something is happening. We don't try to get into the prediction game saying, okay, there's going to be a coronavirus pandemic of epic proportions. We're just saying there is some commotion in chatter regarding China. As you can see, the sentiment went from like being positive to being extremely negative, which is very obvious. So where it gets really interesting is this section here called the context space. So the context space tells you all the different things that people are talking about in relation with China, right? So somebody's talking about racism in China. Somebody's talking about the China syndrome. Somebody's talking about Chinese export, the Chinese police. Somebody's talking about surveillance. So all these different things are mapped in a multi-dimensional space, and we make it available. And it takes a client about 2 or 3 minutes to go through these. But what I will do is, for the purpose of this demo, I will just filter out the ones that our system predicts are gonna become exponential or have become exponential. So as you can see, imported virus cases is becoming exponential. Racism in China is becoming exponential. This is a trend that's been dormant, but now it's becoming exponential. So what I'll do is I'll just click on like a random one. Let's look at, let's say, China-India border, right? And instantly I'll arrive at this page. And this page is a combination of China and the India-China border. So it's an instant report on this China-India situation. And if you look at the signal for it, it was non-existent for almost 2.5 years. And then out of nowhere, around, let's say 10th of May, is the first time our system sent us an email saying, this is deviating from its normal behavior. This is not how this trend is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a flat line. Now it's growing. So this is the first indication that we had that something might go down. And then fast forward 14th of June, there was a major flashpoint and a bunch of people died. And it was a horrific incident, and it almost broke out into a full-scale war. So this is the true power of how our system can basically surface trends before they get exponential at a massive scale. And we are not restricted to like any particular topic. Like I could ask it a question about, let's say, an industry that's growing, probiotics. This is related to consumer goods, right? And we can engage with some large CPG companies in understanding what are the key demand drivers for probiotics. So let's say, I'm interested in figuring out how I should shape the marketing language for probiotics. So let's say I'm looking at gut health, right? Which is what probiotics is traditionally associated with. Another thing I will look at is skin, right? It's a new trend that's coming up. People have started associating probiotics with skin. instantly I will get a side-by-side comparison, and I can see that skin is now the in-trend thing. Gut is fading away from culture. And when we show this to big companies, they're like, holy shit, I did not know that, gut health was fading away, but skin health is what I should be talking about in my marketing language. So again, in a few minutes, I just wanted to show you how robust and diverse the system is. And like I said, 20 million different topics is the total coverage that we have. And it's growing by the day as our system learns more words in the vocabulary.
Okay, good stuff. Let's talk about, before I get to anywhere, Mark, do you have any questions for Pulkit and Imogen on this?
Yeah, so Pulkit, this is amazing, and I really like to say, resurface trends, before they become exponential. Great line, love it. It's a really good way to summarize the power of what you do in one line. And I think this is a very good example of this elevator pitch. Like, what the heck do you guys do? Great, love it. Critical question. So, introduction. 75% of people in company mostly read data, according to a recent Accenture report called the Human Impact of Data Literacy. 65% actually does interpretation. 63% of people are doing with the metadata part. 25% says they actually have a clue what they're doing. 21% actually feels confident. So you go to your client, you offer this, and of course, you just showed us that beautiful curve. But before that curve and the exponential comes, right, you have that point of no return. Will it go up? Will it go down? What's going to happen? I can imagine for your first 10, 15 clients that really understand this stuff, right? The upper right-hand quadrant reference in your Gartner examples, they'll get it. But the moment you're going to scale, you're going to get a lot of those 71% that says, I'll just do something, right? And it can be magnified disastrous for a company, and I come back to you. So 2 questions to you is, 1, do you already, and if you don't, I'm okay, you said we're working on, but do you already have some plans where you scale up? What you need to do as a program and interpretation, maybe software, maybe disclaimers, in order to make sure these clients go in the direction without making irreparable damages in their decisions. The main question, how do you deal with the human factor, right? You roll out, you have a brilliant product, but it's actually at the moment only the happy few get it. How do you make sure that when you scale up, that you keep guiding them, or that you at least make sure that they guide themselves?
That's a great question, and that's a question that we think about every day pretty much. As we're actually going through our fundraising efforts, we've been asked this question so many times. The company that, the comparison is often always drawn with the gold standard company in the space, which is Palantir, right? And Palantir is, just looking to go public actually in the next few weeks to raise, a crap ton of money. And what they're going to do with that money is they're going to hire all these forward deployed engineers. And we don't want to fall into that rabbit hole of hiring forward deployed engineers to interface with the companies. And so as a young, nimble company, our goal is, again, I don't want to advertise SAP because we're on an SAP related podcast, but we're actually integrating with SAP as we speak. We are looking to work with SAP as a channel partner and essentially go hand in hand in a partnership. And I will let Imogen talk about it because I don't want to steal her thunder, but this is totally her department.
Yeah, Imogen?
Yeah, sure. A little bit of backstory behind that. Most recently we've been engaging in this joint collaboration with the APJ innovation team at SAP. And with their support, we have gone live with a platform that helps users understand and navigate, the evolving consumer trends that are related to the coronavirus. So, for example, we were able to demonstrate within our platform the sudden uptick in demand for oximeters, for loungewear, for home office supplies, and also the sudden shift in consumer interest towards biotech companies and also mental wellness companies. So the idea is that we would tie in our trends data in with a procurement platform such as SAP Ariba, in order to help suppliers and manufacturers anticipate the demands for their products so that they can, effectively optimize inventory and manage cash flow. And our collaboration with SAP has been going so well recently that we've decided to apply for the SAP.io Accelerator program. And, this is a fantastic program. We're really excited for it because it's totally equity free, and they will help us integrate our solution into the SAP ecosystem. So if we're selected, we'll receive some mentorship from leading industry experts within SAP who can help us evolve our products to achieve product market fit, and we'll also gain access to SAP's customer base and also venture capital networks. So it'll be really good step in the right direction if we get accepted into this program.
Mark?
I think first is amazing, and thank you again. Right, it's not up to Shelley and me to say big SAP. Of course, we're honored. I do want to share less for Pulkit and Imogen, but for those that are watching and are working to scale up their own company, a word of caution, because I know the people that actually will provide the mentor and the coaching, and I absolutely support the integrity that they will have in working with Imogen and Pulkit. The reality is, when you're a small fish and you start swimming with a bunch of larger fishes, right? You need to make sure that you have 2 or 3 capabilities for yourself, that you don't totally become dependent of the protection of the bigger fish because you start commoditizing yourself as a startup or as a scale-up. So one of the things we always do with our SAP accelerating programs is we coach startups and say, what if we had a divorce tomorrow? What if it doesn't work out? How will you continue? What is your plan B? So we want, like any good relationship, anybody at home who has a relationship and thinks of their partner and says, oh, wow, yeah, recognizes this. It is thinking ahead. Why do you want to stick together? What is each other's added value? So a lot of things that happen with startups, they strike a partnership like that and they say, yeah, I hit the lottery. The reality is, no, you just start at a point that risk is a risk for you to commoditize your product, be totally dependent of your partnership, and lose your grip on your added value because you have to go mainstream for those 80% while you are actually focusing on the first 5% to make a difference. So it's really important to, when you are in the situation as nwo.ai, is that you say, regardless of working with this partner, if I had a partner on my own, what would be my story? What would be my added value? What would keep me differentiating, right? How do I not just technically, partnership is a big differentiation, don't get me wrong, right? And I like it, Pulkit, that you brought the Palantir part up. I would always be polite enough not to talk directly about what's happening in your market and bring an uncomfortable moment in. But compared to, what are your people going to do with your client in your story to their people? That's the most important. What is the first thing you start in the boardroom to say, great solution? I'm going to get 1 second out. One of the things that I worked in the past was freshness of food and weather data. Depending on humidity and temperature changes, raspberries will last 3 days longer in a store or will rot within 24 hours. If you anticipate that because you know in your store the weather's coming, you could put spray on it, you could put the cooler a little bit up, you can put them on sales to get them out, all these actions. And that's exactly what the point was. A lot of retailers starting to work with food and food freshness and less food waste as a great ideal program. But they couldn't translate it to that supermarket manager that had to make that choice at the end of the day. And the buck stop here moment is where the coaching is. The coaching is literally like, not in a frequent asked question, but either you'll do it or you find that partner that explains it on your behalf, mostly a non-technical partner or a technical partner, but you feed that part and say, we make that promotional material, we make those courses, we make those messages, but we only have 5 or 6 experts that can do this for boardrooms. So we'll help you as part of the program, not only that you can incorporate our technology, but we'll help you to deploy it. We'll give you that guidance. And that's one part to stay in the driver's seat about your product. The other is, talk, and talk your head off. Be on TEDs, be on TNW, be on, if you can get in and you know how to get in, go to South by Southwest, but make sure that the world knows this is your vision and your story and your partnership. Just because the two players aren't equal in size, that doesn't mean for the company they're not equal in value. And in every relationship, when you go in, like, nobody says, "Oh yeah, that's my wife or my husband, or my spouse." But like, most successful relationships talk about their partner, like how amazing their partner is and how amazing smart they are. But you should also expect that back from your partner, of course, to do that to you. And that's a little what I call the gold standard or partnerships. Do not let yourself be commoditized.
Okay. We've talked about some good stuff, and it was all positive. What we haven't talked about is challenges. Being a startup, there must be a lot of challenges. So, what kind of challenges have you faced? Are they any different to the challenges an AI startup has against a normal startup? So, what kind of challenges have you faced, Pulkit and Imogen? Maybe you want to share some of those.
Sure. One of the biggest challenges that we're dealing with is, and maybe it's a good problem to have. I can't really be sure about it, but basically, and perhaps Mark can shed some light on this. Basically, our technology is equally adept in different sectors. Everything from consumer products to, supply chain to, I would say, geopolitical signals to finding leading indicators for hedge funds to make trades. And so, what we're basically stretching ourselves really thin at the moment. We are talking to way too many people. Like, on one day we were talking to the technology acquisition head of a hedge fund. The other day we were talking to a consumer products analytics department. And so, how do you define focus in especially a climate like ours, where we burn through quite a bit of cash every month? And in any AI company, you have to quickly raise multiple rounds, and so it's very important that you pick, a few winners in terms of the sectors you focus on. How do you define that? Because we're clearly not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Imogen, you want to add something to it?
I probably have a very different question, so I can.
Well, we'll come to questions, but do you want to add anything to the challenges that you face technically or technology-wise?
Technology-wise, I think one of the challenges that we're facing is finding the right talent to help us build out this platform. I mean, we're a startup, we're small, we have big dreams, big ambitions, but trying to find talent that is, very ambitious, that is willing to stick through all the tough times that we have is not that straightforward. So we're trying to wonder how can we attract really smart people to join our team. Okay,
so through the platform, I can say anyone who's interested in joining a platform like nwo.ai, well, please reach out to Imogen and Pulkit. Okay, now before I get on to question and answers, do you guys have any question for us, for me or Mark, Pulkit and Imogen?
I had a couple of questions, but actually Mark's previous questions pretty much addressed them. Imogen, do you want to ask that question?
I guess one of our questions would be around attracting the right talent and how on earth would go about doing that. So probably not an easy one.
Okay. Maybe I can add one more. So I'm sure you saw in our demonstration that we have this thing called the impact score, which is like a signal that combines internet data, forums, TV mentions, everything into one unified metric. How do you build trust in a customer of our so-called golden figure? How do you make them feel like our signals are the gold standard signals? Or do we even need to prove to them that we are the gold standard signal? How do we work with this? Because let me elaborate a little bit. Most of our customers already have a confirmation bias. They already have a sense of, okay, plexiglass might take off. Okay, nwo.ai's signal just validated that. Okay, India or China might go to war. Okay, the signals just prove that this is actually going to happen. or we completely invalidate their confirmation bias. For example, we have a customer in the food and beverage space that thought that because the economy is opening up in the US, buffets are going to be, trending again, and we proved them wrong. And so how do you make them just refer to you as the go-to platform and not, go to Google Trends and look up something else, try to invalidate our data?
So, wow. I'm going to take talent first because I can be fast on that. No, but your question is really good, but I need to do some batch processing before I reply to that.
No,
Sure.
I can have a go at the at Pulkit's question, but you can go first, Mark, and then I can.
Excellent, because I do have something about Pulkit's question as well. But I want to be sharp. So, Imogen, it's around. It's not how do we attract talent. It's like, why would one talent want to work for you? And the one-liner isn't because you're a startup and just because you got to make someone rich or you got to give someone shares or you have the coolest product in the world. It's actually first and foremost, it's a culture thing. Do I want to work with you? Are you the kind of company I can identify with from all the options that I have? And in this world today, it's not. Everybody talks about inclusion and everybody talks about employee opportunities, etc. But how do you walk the talk and say as you do and do as you say as a young startup when the pressure gets up? And based on that, it can be around, this is who we are. We would like to find people that would be interested to be part of this. That's a really strong part to communicate. Now, I can hear a lot of people in the back of the call, yeah, that's really great, but I love this company. I just like to play with data. I want to go. But both you and the applicant need a filter. The second is, it's still incentives. You're a growing company. What is the short-term and long-term incentive? What's in it for me to stick longer with you and to have extra pizza nights in the weekend? Is it just money? Is it glorification? Is it an access path? So the most successful startups that I've been working on, they have actually been focusing on getting a strong set of mentors in their board of advisors that do not just mentor or coach the founders, but each of them take a high potential in this company and coach this individual, her or him, and how that person can coach others. So you actually need to start thinking already 2 years from now, what do I want to do as a founder? And what kind of people would I have to delegate to? And if you start growing that from yesterday, in your culture, you actually do not just attract somebody like, stocks, options, money. No, we have a culture where we actually want to grow. We're not here for the short run and sell off in 12 months. And if you're that, maybe that's what you should say. We're all going to get loaded rich in 12 months and then it's over, right? So just get the freaking product going and don't care about the documentation. I mean, you know what I mean. So more seriously, like if you're there for the long run, right, think about your own internal manifesto and principles and make sure everybody lives them. Because that's really differentiates a good company from great. It's easy to attract resources. It's hard to keep them. It costs you 9 to 12 times more money to attract a new resource than keeping them for another year. And the impact of a negative resource in your team can be disastrous for your progress. So you can afford to be critical, but in this market, everybody who knows data science and machine learning can afford to be critical. So look for the matchmaking. That's the answer there. You want to go start with Pulkit, Shelly?
Yeah. So before I go to Pulkit, I've got a comment to add there as well. I think there are two kind of people when you're trying to attract talent. The two kind of people who you would see, people who are very ambitious and people who really, really like to do something unique in the world. And these are the guys you would want to attract being a startup, because ambitious people want to be rich, want to have, that's what I think, but want to have, earn money quickly. Whereas people who are really motivated by what they're achieving, what they're delivering, what they're doing, what they're building as outcome are the kind of people that you would want. And of course, then you need to understand what Mark explained around keeping them for a longer period of time. But you need to focus on those people who are driven by the kind of work they do, the kind of new, I've seen so many people, because I've worked every time as a startup in the organization itself, because analytics or data science or AI, whatever you call it, is always new for an organization. And if you set up something for the organization, you would need people who are very focused on delivering that. And so you need people who are really love to play with data, who really like to create, to build an outcome. I think that's what you need to focus on, the kind of people that you get onto the team. To answer your question, Pulkit, on building trust, I think nothing succeeds like success. And that's part of my book as well, because it's an old story of mine. When I was working for a large retailer, and for 3 months, I was building this analytics team, and no one would come to us from business to use us. And I went to my boss and said, well, why did you hire us? Because, no one wants to use us. Why? People want to do something else, and, everyone thinks that they know everything. Why did you hire us? So he gave me one thing, and this is with all due respect to Richard Umbers, who was the CEO of Myers of late, after he left where I was working. And he said to me one thing, Shelly, nothing succeeds like success. You have one success story and everyone will follow you. But you need to make sure that one success story is so big and so articulated well to the business that everyone thinks that you were doing the right thing. And that's exactly what happened. I had one success story, and in no time, everyone wanted to use us. And suddenly, from a one-man company in that organization, we were 25 people because I was doing something unique. So nothing succeeds like success is what I always tell, and that is how you build trust. And there is another component of building trust is when you're talking to people, when you're explaining stuff to people, you need to start with stuff they know. So as you just said, people think that they know this is going to happen. But that's building trust, that's building confidence therein when you tell them what they already know. I'll tell you, I was selling this project to a large telco. I don't want to name them, but they were not interested in analytics at all. They were not. They said, even if we wanted analytics, we will go to an analytics company, not to you, because you are an SI. True. Why would they come to us? So the way I structured that discussion was, I first 20 minutes told him what he already knew to build that confidence that I knew his business. And the remaining 20 minutes, I told him what he didn't know, so that he was confident enough on the fact that I know his business, I know what he knows, and then I put forward in front of him on a plate that this is what you don't know. And this will make a huge impact to your business. And he said, so can I have that? So the discussion, so I also tell people that you have to change the question itself. You don't have to go and answer, you have to question. And it is the question that is going to do to help you, not the answer. You need to change the discussion to your to your benefit, if that makes sense.
So there's a real good point, and Shelly, I want to chip in and actually connect Imogen and Pulkit's questions together. And I have one for Imogen. Start thinking about the question. When I'm done, I'm going to ask you the question, what is your challenge with the talent pool? Which, by the way, was from Casper Hop in the comments. So coming back, when I worked at AT&T, every week I got a bunch of tech people, and they came with 10, 12 people in my room. And they all started to talk about, A, how great the products are, or worse, they had some training in the industry, and they started to explain me, and this tells you when it was, how much 3G was going to change and how the industry was. And I'm like, dude, if I'm not telling you how to make software, will you stop telling me how to run a telco company? And so the first is, in your talent, not only do you need tech people, but you need people that have that social intelligence skills, that understand how to address the questions that Shelley focuses on, but also how to actually tell the story or listen to them and respond to the story in terms of that client at the side of the table. Now, it's easy for a large company. You just say, well, I just hire, let's say you want to go in telco, I hire a CTO, somebody was a CTO is a large telco, and I bring him or her in to talk about other CTOs. You don't have that luxury. So back to your focus point, Pulkit, it's needing your investors probably will guide you, hopefully in the top 3 industries they want to go, or you'll guide your investors in the top 3 industry you want to go. And you need to get one person, maybe with some consultative skills, that actually understands that that your first meeting with a client isn't presenting how great your product is, but actually finding out where their pain is. And the moment you can say, this is the pain in your industry, this is the pain that you have, this is where we add value, that's the moment the tech person comes in and says, let me do the demo. Now, back to Pulkit's thing, how do you deal with that? Of course, absolutely, reference, example thing, as Shelley says. But the other part is skills. And it starts with your story. Your one-liner is, why can we actually see that exponential growth? Because we look beyond Google. We actually filter what the wisdom of the crowd is. There's a great book for those that are on the show, maybe also for Pulkit and Imogen, Algorithms of Oppression from Safia Umoja Noble, is a publication by NYU, how search engines unwillingly reinforce bias and, for instance, also racism and non-inclusion. It's not meant bad, but if you take, for instance, the Spanish language, when in the 90s, all young men who were very excited, mostly at American universities, or in Indian IT places were training Google Translate, they used in Spanish hombre su casa, which translates as the man, his house, and then, of course, mujer su casa, which translates as the woman, his house, because the gender of house is male, and therefore automatically most men had only trained it from their perspective, never from a woman. That doesn't mean that Google is bad, but it means it has inherent bias in it because it has also been trained by another wisdom in the crowd. And Imogen, your power is in that, listen, we can explain how we come to example. We can explain how we come to answer. These are some cases, and these are some track records of cases, but this is continuously how your customer can look back, how we filter out some bias that inherently comes from some sources. We're bigger than Google, we're wider than Google, but we also show you where the bias is. And a lot of companies now start playing like, well, but if I want to keep the bias, if I don't want to have the bias, what does it mean? So the before and after. So that's the kind of talent that can also articulate that. But it starts with your one message. Exactly, love your one-liner, right? We predict exponential impact. Great. We also do that because we can show you continuously where that is happening, and you can check our track record on every data point. By the way, here's a reference that can talk to you about it. So Imogen, what is your challenge in the marketplace to find talent?
Sorry, what is my challenge?
Your challenge in the marketplace to find talent?
Well, I guess the challenge centers around the technology that we're building. It's, we have this such a visionary product and such so many hurdles that we need to get over. I gave this analogy to Pulkit the other day. It was that when you're crossing a mountain, if you're standing at the peak of the mountain and you look across the horizon, you don't know how many mountain peaks there are until you reach the other end. So when we're trying to hire talent, we can't just say you need to achieve X, Y, and Z. It's the fact that there are so many hurdles that we need to get over before we can get there. So trying to communicate that to somebody and finding someone who will actually stick around as we go over every single hurdle and every single mountain is not that easy to find. So I guess that's the challenge specifically that we're having.
That's a really good. I like that metaphor. It's both at IBM Watson as when we started our Leonardo portfolio at SAP. we had similar things, right? And I think you need to also test up front before you can hire. I mean, I personally still find hackathons, especially nowadays, virtual hackathons, where I do something with my product. There's a little price in it. The price can be coming from your investors, like a scholarship or a contribution to a scholarship, or the best 4 will get a job. The best 8 the next 4 will get a contribution to a grant or a scholarship, whatever. But by the way, all the IP coming out of this hackathon is mine. And right, that's the disclaimer, you sign up. But in that challenge of that hackathon, which could be an hour a day or a repeating 5 every week, one step, and people outside your session do something, we also worked in multiple challenges. So we really saw people that, like a sprinter trying to do a marathon, that went full blown in the first round, and in the second round were exhausted in the first round. They didn't even log in anymore. And that's part to your hurdle part. That's somebody have that persistence, that stamina to do 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, maybe even 3 steps back and go forward again. That resilience is one of the qualities you're looking for in a startup. And testing in a kind way with a reward or a prize at the end is definitely a great way to do that. But it also needs extra efforts to have someone in your company that says, can we set it up? Or maybe somebody who's willing to help you, starting from your investor or your advisory, that says, yeah, I know somebody who can temporarily help you to set it up. You have to run it afterwards, but can design it. And the good thing is, like, you're in the partnership going with SAP. That's one of the things through such a partnership you can also facilitate, right? Say, hey, we want to do this. Can we use your event people to help us to attract talent, right? That's one of the asks to do to a partner as well. Of course, with the risk that we also see interesting talent, but you need to make sure that is taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Is it helpful for you? Because I can't.
That's fantastic advice. No, thank you so much.
Okay, before we get forward, I think I must say one thing. Very engaging conversation. We still have around about 40 people watching us. And now I will quickly jump onto the questions. And guys, whosoever is watching us, this is your opportunity to ask questions to Marc, Pulkit, and Imogen. So here we go. Let's start with the questions and the comments. So there is a comment from Arthur De Crook, and says, morning Arthur, how are you? The second comment is from Zohar Batriwala on LinkedIn. He says, I'm very interested in artificial intelligence. Can you please share this webinar recording? Of course. It will be available to you, and I'll share the link with you later. Okay, next one. David Turkle, and he says, what are the top 3 advancements in AI which will accelerate adoption by larger organizations? I think this is for Marc.
So top 3 advancement in AI. First is what we call AI for the masses, that we went to what we call platforms of microservices, APIs that have been packaged in such a way that I can just drag and drop them as an app developer. So it's pre-trained, it's pre-created, it already knows how to solve a problem. It can do one task, and I literally drag and drop it into my my app, right? You can basically work on AWS or TensorFlow and use raw material and make your own microservice or API. You can also go to platforms like what we do with SAP Machine Learning Cloud and literally say, oh, right, I like to have really something that does a chatbot function. I'm not in the mood to write it. Drop, customize, right? If it's like a little bit like, if you can swipe, you can build. If you can swipe, you can also date nowadays. Second thing that is there is what I call lifecycle management. Like training an AI is providing examples, data labeling, either your own or your expert or your data case. The problem is, if it was wrong, you couldn't take one step back. You couldn't clone your trained model, etc. There's a bunch of tools in the market. SAP's one is data intelligence that allows you to literally take your Jupyter notebook and basically connect to it and say, oh, I want to go back to my last training because my current training isn't as good anymore as it was, or oopsie dozy, I have a bias in it. Can I go 3 steps back instead of totally have to ditch the model and start? So that makes not just development, but governance and management really much more. The third is just market adoption. In 2015, I stood at the Smithsonian and I had to stand and explain to an audience literally what AI was and how it worked. My first TED Talk in 2012 was explaining how IBM bought someone Jeopardy. In 2017, I had to explain how startups scale up, and I still had to explain a little bit what AI training is. In 2018, we're just talking about it's AI, it's there, how do you make money out of it? And today, we're talking about, so it has become mainstream. That is actually the biggest advancement, because mainstream means there are people and talent in the market that can create it. So if I'm a company now, there's AI for the masses, it's easy to develop. There's management that actually doesn't break me in my development or my deployment cycle, and there's talent. It wasn't there the last 3 years. So the time is now.
I think most of these are available, and I say one thing almost on every show of mine, that is that when we started a career, building a model, we needed SaaS, and SaaS was $250,000. So I couldn't buy anything to actually do that individually. Today, we've got so many freewares, and the technology is available, the data is available. Actually, that advancement for the masses, as Marc said, is already there. It's your willpower to do what you want to do. Like Pulkit and Imogen have actually jumped into it and started doing stuff. So I think we are there. The future is here today. Okay, next question. I will take this one. There were quite a few questions from Joseph Dolphin. Hi, Joseph, how are you? And he's saying, how is AI solutions addressed when we upgrade? Will it retain my AI integration? What tools are available for AI maintenance, especially during an upgrade or migration? I think this is specific to SAP. Do you want to answer that, Marc, or you want to leave it?
So one of the things in SAP is that we fully are open to integrate. So if you take, for instance, SAP Analytics Cloud, which contains our machine learning, we built on top of existing platforms as well, whether it's TensorFlow, AWS, IBM Watson, Microsoft Cognitive. But we also have that own layer where we use our own data intelligence, how you do your maintenance management, your lifecycle management. And beside that, the code we create from scratch is that code that we don't want you to log in, because those are the integration to the back doors of our SAP software. That would be a privacy and safety hazard if we would open that up. Except for that, everything we do is open. So the great thing is, when you have AI solution with SAP and you upgrade, right, that training data is there, that API or microservice is there. So it's much more, if you use SAP itself, you shouldn't have to worry. If you build an app against or consuming SAP, right, as long as you have layer that if something gets upgraded, the best example is, if you used, in the old days, people had one field for customers, so first name, last name. And suddenly they got smart and said, we need 2 fields, right? How flexible is your consuming technology at that moment to benefit from a change? Have you wired everything hardwired in, or did you create flexible? So to the second part of the question, what tools are available for AI maintenance, especially during an upgrade migration? From a data training, labeling, and lifecycle point of view, it's the data intelligence solution that we have provided. It's sap.com/data intelligence. Everything is there. The maintenance of your own tool. So if you created something on, let's say, Microsoft or TensorFlow, right, and we upgrade, as we're not going to just change our AI solutions or core, right? We might, and if we do it, we really communicate, and we basically always recommend every of our partners create an interpretation layer between your technology and the technology that you consume. So mostly you only have to change the mapping in that layer, nothing else.
Okay. Thank you, Marc, for that. The next question from Prabjot Singh Nair, and says, What should be the criteria of selecting NLP or NLU engine for building AI product? And Mark, who better to answer that question than you?
Yeah, well, the question is, what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And what is the kind of quality you need most? Do you need parsing? Do you need inference? Do you basically need irrational scattering? So when you go for an engine, every engine is really mostly good in one thing and does the rest at the side. Nobody does it. So the moment I go for really business things, like I want to compare to documents, etc., right? IBM Watson as an enterprise engine that can connect back to enterprise data is really, really powerful. But if I'm a consumer app developer, I'm much better off using this is my personal opinion, by the way. Disclaimer. I'm much better off by using a TensorFlow where I actually don't have cost yet, or when I know for sure I'm going to go commercial really rapidly in AWS, if I want a rigid. And so it's the flexibility versus rigid. It's the core part versus the non-core part and the problem you're trying to solve. That is the matrix. There's a lot of, if you just go to CB Insights, etc., there's a lot of reviews written on that part.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Next comment is from Kiran Nanduri. Hi, Kiran, how are you? He says, hi, Shailendra and Mark. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Kiran. Another question from Joseph Dolphin. Joseph, he says, can you also brief us on what kind of marketplace or exchange available for AI? It's a very interesting question, and as I was reading the question, it came to my mind, well, I haven't seen any such thing, but it is a very good idea. Mark, have you seen anything?
So there are two kinds of marketplaces, right? There's marketplaces for labeled data or for trained data. Mm-hmm. There are a limited amount of players who do that. It was one of my hopes and dreams when I was at Watson that we would actually create an exchange like that you have in a sort of universal standard level, an exchangeable export for trained data that regardless of the technology platform people can use. That you can say, here I have contracts, here I have how you train for trends, here I have how you read Google trend data, whatever. We're not there yet. We slowly have gotten used to the concept of app stores in industries. And universal app stores that could work on 3 or 4 platforms are still 3 to 5 years away in business software. Unlike you and I in consumer, it's a little bit still segregated in the market as well. I mean, there's an Android app store and there's an Apple app store, but what's in one is not in the other. And very few build a app in such a way up that you say, I'm going to be as independent as possible and only do that last layer of Android and iOS in the last part, right? Mostly develop on one platform, then try to clone it to the other. It's the same with AI. So there's AI data and there's AI services. Now, the marketplace for AI services, I want to say, the good thing is they're all microservices. So if you go to a really smart cloud provider that hosts a lot of them, right, it's pretty easy to string them together. The moment you go over multiple clouds, right, the only disadvantage is your training data, your labeling data is probably going to be spread over those clouds, so it's much harder to create your own code. I think we're getting there. I think for SAP, 2 years ago, we were talking about a product like data intelligence. We created things. We acquired part of this market. It's live. It's running since 6 months. It's still growing. We're learning. It's amazing in 2.5 years that if you would have 3 years said, like, I want to burn so many double-digit millions for a product like this, people would have said, nah, not making money for that, right? And now people say, like, oh, how much do you need more, right? What do you need for the next function? So it shows you that we're getting to this exchange. I think real good providers slowly are figuring out that they need to have an app store within their platform that not only does apps, but in that same does have data sets or data exchanges that AI can use, preferably pre-labeled in some format that can be absorbed. But most of us are still just using some JSON databases and sucking it out MongoDB to bring it from one to the other and do some JavaScripts. That's where we are today.
I think it has to come through. But anyways, let's go to the next question. Joseph Dolphin asks, what do you predict on the COVID vaccine? When do you reckon we would have one? This is for Pulkit.
Yeah, I'm not taking that one.
That's a very dangerous territory. So I can't, the truth is that we can't answer that question yet, but what I would like to mention is that recently, Imogen and I, we've added research reports and patent filings into our data set. So what that means is we can understand the bleeding edge of where a certain innovation is going. So let's say you ask the system a question about GANs, basically. It will tell you exactly what facet of GANs are going to be the next big thing. Or if you ask it about the next big innovation in genetic sequencing as a keyword, we can show you exactly what are the trends that are going from dormant to emerging stage. So that's an example of something that we would be able to use the platform for. Is it ready right now? The answer is no. So I can't answer that question, unfortunately.
Okay. Let's get to the next one. That's also related to pandemic. Bibek Neopain. Hi, Bibek. How are you? He says, how could AI cope with the situation of pandemic? Will it be able to make our life easy in the current situation? Who wants to have a go at that? Mark?
Let me give you an example there. Most retailers have invested the last years in total efficiency. So the whole supply chain is, I'll make it somewhere in Asia, I put it on a ship, the ship arrives, it goes to a global distribution center, then brings it to a local distribution center, then brings it to a store distribution center, then the truck comes in the store and directly from the back office goes in the store. If one thing goes wrong, everything goes wrong. So in those efficient world, they have created automatic replenishment. Mostly they were static rule-based algorithm. And then COVID-19 hit. And then you saw the difference between supermarket that says, running out of toilet paper, must have triple the amount tomorrow. And then and in the end, there was more toilet paper in the distribution center than we need for the coming century, because they keep reordering and replenishing. And there were supermarkets that had built-in flexibility that says, my franchises can always up to 20% of their assortment buy local. And then there were supermarkets that says, I will aid my franchises to buy local by continuously monitor changes in what's happening and giving them those signals. Those latter ones had done two things. They had built in flexibility for their franchises that they could give to every own store. And they had built the flexibility that the algorithm didn't keep doing what it was doing yesterday, definition of insanity, doing the same over and over again and expecting another outcome, but directly had that agility to change. It's the two things, your organizational model and the flexibility you built in your AI. The more you're hardwired, the more you're efficient, but it's at the cost of agility and resilience.
I want to add something there. AI is all based on the digital data. What COVID has done is created that urgency of creating that digital transformation exercise in an organization. I remember those companies or retailers who used to say, I'm not going to go digital, I don't need to do that. And today they're all digital and they want to go digital quicker than they could have been. So it has actually accelerated that speed to create data and create more and more data and go on and make everything online. I think there was a joke that was going around. Who is the key advisor for digital transformation in your organization? Is it the CIO, the CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? And I think it was COVID-19 which has actually made that quite a quick run. Next question from Kiran Nanduri. And says, any new innovations from SAP in AI space and use cases? Can you list a few? I'm not sure about few, but there are lots of new innovations. And Mark, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so first this is going to be a shameless plug because we can't cover all the cases. So for those of you who type in my last name and go to my recent TED speech or my TNW speeches, you will get a series of examples, much deeper explained there. I think the most important new innovation that we have had is bringing in the pulse of employees and the pulse of customers into the supply chain. So we bought Qualtrics. We made Qualtrics available during COVID-19 without cost for companies to continuously measure every day, how are you doing working at home, not in the office, etc. We did the same for opening up Ariba as a marketplace for 90 days without cost. And we took those, what you call those experience sentiments, within a closed system, of course, not like nwo.ai does. And we connected that back to the impact of the planning and the resource management and actually the organizational parts. In other words, how do you make sure you don't burn up your people? And how do you continuously, as management, keep an eye on an organization that is hit everywhere? And normally AI is about efficiency, and it's actually not about becoming inefficient to get a longer haul result. So there was basically a big mind shift to do that. If you go to sap.com and you go to the artificial intelligence part, you see some more use cases in that area.
Okay, perfect. Next comment from Marvendra Sharma says, hi, Mark. Hi, Marvendra, how are you?
Namaste.
And then there's a question from Gaurav Bansal, and it says, question to Pulkit. How does these predictions impact share market? Did you see any trend? And I think, Pulkit, we were talking about that when we were on the phone. Do you want to share some examples or use cases?
Yeah, I mean, I would be giving away too much alpha away from our hedge funds to you guys if I end up telling you about it. But an example of how we fine-tuned and found certain leading indicators that allowed us to determine, or allowed some investors to determine their thesis on certain companies. For example, one of the funds we contacted, they were major investors in Chipotle as a stock, right? And I believe he's talking about the share market, which is the public stock market. Is that right, Shelley?
I think so, yes.
Okay, I hope so. All right, so and then we looked at all the different factors that people were talking about in correlation with or related to Chipotle, and we found that food safety was a big factor. And then our system basically computed the cross correlation between all the factors that it found related to Chipotle and the stock price of Chipotle in real time, and found that food safety is the single biggest driver for Chipotle stock price. So whenever there's like some E. coli infestation in the food, the stock crashes. Whenever they announce some good practices, the stock goes up. Whenever people are complaining and tweeting about how people at Chipotle are not wearing their masks while serving the food, the stock price goes down. So that's just one example of how we can find leading indicators at scale. Another one was where we predicted that Shopify was gonna just jack up like crazy, which it did about 3 months ago. That was another big one. I can name plenty more, but I think I'll just stop here.
Shopify, Netflix, and Zoom, I think they were the culprits during the COVID-19 scenario where the stock price just zoomed.
Yeah, I mean, those were the obvious ones. So I guess the real alpha is in finding the ones that are not obvious, the ones that are like the ripple effects, not the first degree that everybody is going to be thinking.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. There is a comment from a LinkedIn user saying AI relevance in risk assessment suite for loan products. Any specific use case insights, please? I don't have a user, so I can leave that if you want to. Okay.
It's the one-liner there is, Shelley, is like, this is like everything about risk is about getting better insight in your exposure, and a balanced algorithm that continuously readapts is always stronger than a predefined rule. So yeah, there's a lot of AI-powered risk products on the market already.
Okay. Casper Hope says, nice Pulkit, clear talk. Thank you, Casper. There's a question from Nagendra Naga. He says, difference between data scientists and AI. this I can have a full session on that if you want, a full 2 hours. But I think, yeah, Mark, you want to say something? I want to skip that question.
No. I gonna say, like, yeah, this is the difference between a lasagna and a microwave, right? I'm not gonna go there today. Sorry.
They're two different things. I think I need to do a session on this myself because it is on my platform that someone has asked that question, and I will do that. Okay. In AI, which mainly focuses on machine learning or deep learning, tell me. Oh, I don't know what that means.
Well, we kind of warmed, right? The point is that first, AI is not only machine learning, and within AI there are so many techniques because it's a container term, right? And yes, you also use, by the way, to the previous part, you use also normal statistical things. You also use hardwired rules. If I have an AI powered solution and the conversion from Fahrenheit to Celsius is necessary, it's not really worth the effort to build an AI model to calculate that, right? It's a pretty straight hardwired formula in physics that is not going to change over time. There are different ways to do machine learning, right? And the point is mostly supervised or unsupervised. Do you let the thing goes off, the wisdom of the crowd? And back to Pulkit's part, why are we better than Google? Well, there's a lot of unsupervised learning going on in Google. If you type in lawyers are, you get a lot of adjectives for the profession that most lawyers wouldn't be happy on, but that's what they call the wisdom of the crowd and putting it on. That's some noise you also need to get out. So this is where, even after unsupervised learning, you need to do some supervision. Say, no. Those kind of things you probably don't. We're gonna get, that's the kind of noise I don't want to include. So it's I think to answer this question fully is really going to, is what you're trying to solve known, and are the examples known so you can start directly with supervised learning, or are there so many patterns that you first need to discover that over such an amount of data that deep learning, unsupervised first, is going to help you out better? But do not kid yourself. There's no such thing as a shortcut, right? That says, oh, I just run the algorithm and I apply it. Everybody knows the Amazon example of the resume. And if not, I invite you to Google it. Great deep learning, no insight in what's happening, no rollback to the previous algorithm, and no mitigating actions to correct the unsupervised learning.
Okay. And I can say that I've written an article which is the difference between predictive analytics, machine learning, and AI, available on LinkedIn, Twitter. Just search for it and you'll find one. Find the article. I think that will give you much more insight into it in details. Next question from Casper Hop. And Casper says, Dear Pulkit, can you elaborate on causality and correlation? Let's say COVID and probiotics. How do you qualify links?
I'll defer this question to Imogen because this is totally her thing.
Imogen?
There's no way to determine whether a signal is based on correlation or causation. If it's based on causation, that's a very hard metric to determine. But correlation is something that we definitely can determine. And there are methods such as applying a time-lagged cross-correlation algorithm that we have that can determine whether or not one trend is a leading indicator of another trend. So there are ways to determine the lag of a correlation, but causation is definitely a difficult challenge.
Mark, do you want to add something?
I think Imogen said it perfectly. I mean,
okay. Akshay Chakar, hi Akshay, how are you? What do you think about AI in India? Huge population as compared to other countries. I think AI in India is a bright proposition, huge population, great challenges, and will give some great solutions. It's just the willpower and the will of the people to actually imply, and implement. So I'll say there is a great, I think it's great. Next, Sumit Patnaik says, how do I feel an advantage of AI in my hardcore process industry and my manufacturing industry, iron, steel and iron industry, a mining industry, So let me know where do I integrate this instead knowing human and it give lots of errors. So I can plug in AI to enhance more sophistication and better yield. I'm a bit confused with the question, but Mark, do you want to have a...
I'm going to break it in two. How can I apply the advantage of AI in my hardcore processes? And so there's a series of hardcore processes. One of them is when you do in mining, you do excavation, operations, etc. You're dependent on equipment. One of the great example is Vale, a Brazilian-based mining company. It takes a field technician around 20 minutes after they did plane, train, automobiles to go to the middle of nowhere to figure out what these big Caterpillar trucks, why it's not functioning. And for every hour that thing is standing still, you lack 1.7 million average in revenue in that core process. 20 minutes to diagnose it and 3 to 4 hours to figure out what the frickin' part number is, to connect with somebody the other side in the world and get a procurement order for something that's actually within bandwidth. We narrowed it down to seconds, and within the bandwidth automatically replenished, allowing this field technician to do actually proactive maintenance on the other parts. So I think this goes also back to the Indian question. The real advantage is you take a process that you know. You focus on, there's one part in that process that is the heavy lifting, where human people that are educated do repetitive, mind-numbing activities that take a long time, and you take that one task away from them. It's a little bit like an Uber app. We take the task away that you stand in the rain in New York, in the dark, waving for a cab that never stops, and we take the second task away that the jerk behind you jumps in your cab. Right? That's actually what it did. It takes one task away. Good AI in processes, like for instance SAP, takes one step away. Nobody became a lawyer to spend 70% of their time in red line comparing two contracts and say, where did the intent change and where did is the Oxford comma still there? Which is the difference between an exclusion and a disclaimer. Nobody became an accountant to say, let's go daily to 47 spreadsheets and see which companies we need to do invoice reconciliation. But everybody says, okay, these are the outliers. These are the exciting cases. This is what I'm trained for. Let the machine do the heavy lifting. So good AI focuses on that one task, not even job, but that one task where it can relieve the heavy lifting from a knowledge worker and get actually focus on growth and benefits and not just on cost saving. I know it's a high-level answer, but the Vale case is also on our website.
Okay, perfect. Very quickly, there was a question from Casper first. Casper said, Dear Imogen, what's your challenge about talent, please? And then she answered it, saying that she's got the answer. Thanks, finding engineers with product vision, the next mountain peak. Imogen, for you. Okay. Arthur de Cook says, great show, Shalindra. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you for the comment. Bijoy Das, hi Bijoy, how are you? He says, any plans on PyTorch support apart from TensorFlow? Mark, this is for you.
Well, let's start with the fact that because of data intelligence, we already connect to Jupyter notebooks. So everything you can do on Jupyter notebooks or Anaconda, etc., right, is being supported. This is a question I must really say where I normally pick up the phone and call one of our most brilliant people that actually say, like, how far are we in this? So, yeah, it's clearly the pipeline. I can't answer give more details here.
There are 3 comments, and then I will just get off questions. So Sarji Johal on Twitter says, AI eats data for food, and in India, mobile data to be more specific is cheapest. Great comment. Yes, you're right. That means India has abundant data being generated by masses. Even right. So I am absolutely with you on that. But Sarabjit, intent to implement and to comply. Sarabjit this is the last question I'll take. How do you address the problem of creativity with AI because data is after the fact construct? I don't know what that last 4 words meant. Sarabjit, I'm sorry, if you're still online, you can put that, clarify on that. Otherwise, yep, creativity is something that needs to be trained, and I don't think AI is still yet very creative, and we'll look at that. Okay, thank you guys. I will get off questions and about to end the show. The last thing before we end the show, for Marc. Marc, do you have any advice for, sorry, hide that. Okay. Marc, do you have any advice for Pulkit and Imogen? Finally.
So first, again, I want to give kudos to you guys. You have done it. You created a product. You took the chance. You stuck your neck out. You forged a partnership with a company like SAP. You're here on the show, right? You already did a series of milestones. And I think that is worth so much more respect, because talking about and walking the talk are really big things, right? So again, kudos. The second is, of course, the famous don't give up now, right? Make sure you get sleep, you get work, spread the burden, don't take everything on your shoulder, the normal kind of human things. For your product, in your message to the customer, but also in your developing to yourself, the creativity is with the humans. Let the robots, let the AI do the heavy lifting, and focus on the creativity that needs to be scaled within your company and needs to be scaled at your customers. I think the more you go in that line, this is the creativity needs to be scaled, these are the steps to do that, this is the kind of talent you do that. This is what happens when you give my product in the wrong hands at your company customer, right? Unless you're like a warehouse full with millions of rolls of toilet paper until the end of the 21st century. That's the part. Focus on that value prop, how that customer will translate that to lasting revenue, and how it does mitigate its own organizational constraints. You don't have to solve it for them, but make it part of your story. Like, when we do this, this is what your responsibility is going to be.
Good stuff. Now, before I close the show, one last comment and a phrase from all three of you, one by one, that a message that you want to leave for the audience. And I'll start with Pulkit.
Wow, really putting me on the spot.
Yes, I will.
Well, I would say, as an entrepreneur, there's only one way to jump. Just jump it. And so just make the move and get shit done. That's the only thing I'm going to say.
Imogen?
This is really, really corny, but I've carried it along throughout my entire life. It's a little phrase that I always live by. It's called, you can if you believe you can. And everywhere I go, if there's a problem, if I believe I can, then I can.
Good stuff. Marc?
Certainly not corny. I think it's the differentiation between an entrepreneur and an employee, right? So yeah, I'm going to rephrase the last part I said again. If you really want to be successful by having an AI-driven product, take a process, start with a process you know, and take the heavy lifting away with AI. That's the one-liner for success I'm going to give you there.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. We went way over time with all those questions, and it was a great engagement. I think we had so many people, and there are still questions which I couldn't cover because there are a few. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Shelley. I can tell you that I've never done such an early morning sun program as today, and whatever the camera is doing, the sun is shining and so bright here that it can't deal with the white balance anymore. So it's been a phenomenal wake-up pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marc, for your time, and it was a pleasure having you, and I look forward to the next episode of the series, which will be in a fortnight, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
See you later. So guys, that was the show. We had Marc Teerlink with Imogen and Pulkit from nwo.ai. Hope you enjoyed the show. You learned a thing or two on AI, and I'll be back for the next episode of this show in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from now, Tuesday. And we'll see you then. So till then, bye and have a good time. See you then.